Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And as with every single year, you're going to hear and see all kinds of people uncritically repeating quotes from the iconic protester for civil rights. Republicans tend to think the only thing the man believed was the line about a dream for his kids to live in a country where they're judged by the content of their character rather than their skin tones.
I have a dream that my poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
And you're likely going to hear some moderate white liberal types share the other one that people love about the arc of the moral universe being long but tending to bend toward justice.
When our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil, a power that is able to make a way out of no way and transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
Now, do not get me wrong. These are both beautiful sentiments that communicate deeply correct ideas about seeking justice and liberation. The problem lies in how they're weaponized when not shared in good faith. When white conservatives selectively share the "I have a dream" quote, they maliciously mean to distort Dr. King's words to have you believe that he's advocating for a colorblind society which whitewashes what he fought for and was ultimately killed over. And when white, moderate, liberal types share the quote about the long bend of the moral universe, they often are communicating that racial justice and equality are important, but should be achieved in due time. Kind of a let's not rock the boat too much approach. A view which benefits the power structure, the white status quo. You see, we have voluminous source material to pull from that tells us exactly what Dr. King believed about these matters. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was someone committed to liberation theology and social justice. He protested on behalf of the poor and believed poverty was a policy choice. He had many people in his corner allying themselves with the cause and marching with him. And as much as he had to say in his battle against conservative white America, he also had critique for, or grave disappointment, he called it, in white moderates. Stick around to hear the man yourself. At the end, I will play a Martin Luther King video of he himself reading the words he wrote from the Birmingham jail, imprisoned for peacefully protesting the wrong way. So when you hear today both white conservatives and white moderates say, Martin Luther King Jr. was a great man. I agree with Martin Luther King. If I had been around back then, I would love to have been marching. I certainly would have marched with Martin Luther King Jr. When you hear people say those things, let them know that we know. White conservatives, we know. White moderates, we know. We all know how you would have acted based on how you're acting right now. Martin Luther King's fight was all of our fight. And sadly, our fight didn't end when a conservative white man assassinated him in 1968. The fight continues in Minneapolis, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Chicago, New Orleans, and smaller communities all across our nation. So many people think everyone approved of and admired Martin Luther King Jr. and his work back then, the way that he's almost collectively respected now. That is simply not the case. Between the white conservatives and the white moderates he spoke of, they disapproved of his tactics, his peaceful protesting tactics. In 1966, 2 years before his murder, a Gallup poll found that 63% of Americans had an unfavorable opinion of him. The people who held this view weren't the allies marching with him. They were the people watching marches on their televisions at home and complaining that it wasn't the right way to do things. Also, in 1966, another poll found that 85% of white Americans, 85%, thought that civil rights demonstrations and protests by black people hurt their cause more than it helped. We know now that they were wrong, and that mass demonstration events that took place, like the 1963 March on Washington, were pivotal in changing not only hearts and minds, but also our laws and government policies. In fact, the now universally lauded and respected March on Washington was widely disapproved of by Americans at the time. In August of 1963, the year of the march, 60% of Americans had unfavorable feelings about the march, while only 23% held favorable views. So when you see activists in the streets of America today peacefully yet loudly and aggressively protesting Donald Trump's masked secret police force of Nazis who are conducting ethnic cleansing raids all over the country to create a white ethno-state, don't be the complaining white moderate who has nothing but criticism to offer for methods or stern words about the right way to protest. Get in the fight or stay out of the way. Better yet, you can jump on the right side of history right now. Don't have people in 60 years looking back and shaking their heads in disbelief about how the clearly moral action was rejected. Join a protest. March for social justice. Animate yourself to action against this white supremacist administration. Prove to the world that you actually would have fought for those things with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. back in the 1960s. Now, hear for yourself why Martin Luther King Jr. was gravely disappointed in the white moderate.
I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. I had hoped that the white moderate would understand that law and order exist for the purpose of establishing justice, and that when they fail in this purpose, they become the dangerously structured dams that block the flow to social progress. I had hoped that white moderates would understand that the present tension in the South is a necessary phase of the transition from an obnoxious negative peace in which the Negro passively accepted his unjust plight to a substantive and positive peace in which all men will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. Actually, we who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of tension. We merely bring to the surface the hidden tension that is already alive. We bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with, like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be open with all its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tension its exposure creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. In your statement, you assert that our actions, even though peaceful, must be condemned because they precipitate violence. But is this a logical assertion? Isn't this like condemning a robbed man because his possession of money precipitated the evil act of robbery? Isn't this like condemning Socrates because his unswerving commitment to truth and his philosophical inquiries precipitated the act by the misguided populace in which they made him drink hemlock? Isn't this like condemning Jesus because his unique God consciousness and never ceasing devotion to God's will precipitated the evil act of crucifixion? We must come to see that, as the federal courts have consistently affirmed, it is wrong to urge an individual to cease his efforts to gain his basic constitutional rights because the quest may precipitate violence. Society must protect the robbed and punish the robber.
An astonishing note, really, to think that that would be sent by the president.
Donald Trump is a dangerous lunatic, part 3,267,412, I guess. His lunacy is going to propel the United States into starting, being the tip of the spear in a global military conflict. And MAGA, they're okay with it. Trump's sycophants and bootlickers all around him, including Ted Cruz, try to explain it as it's America first to start World War III. It's America first to invade Greenland, to attack a peaceful ally in Norway. Donald Trump, I have the text of a note he sent to the leader of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre, that is, to call it unhinged just doesn't get it done. Saying that he's, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, he says. The man who got his soccer peace prize is now, because of personal grievance, threatening military conflict, war, death, carnage over Norway, who doesn't even award Nobel Prizes, over Norway not giving him the Nobel Prize. He said it in the note to another world leader. He is an aggrieved fucking toddler. He's a tantrum-throwing coward, a draft-dodging, physical weakling, who now, because of the idiocy of the unwashed, low-information horde of rubes in MAGA, the commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful and exceedingly well-funded military. This is from Nick Schifrin, works for PBS NewsHour, a very credible source, and this is what he tweeted. New President of the United States letter to Jonas Gahr Støre links Nobel Prize to Greenland, reiterates threats, and is forwarded to the National Security Council staff to multiple European ambassadors in Washington. I obtained the text from multiple officials. Dear Ambassador, President Trump has asked that the following message shared with Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre be forwarded to your named head of government state. Dear Jonas, Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant. Will it be predominant? You just said you're not thinking about peace, dumb fuck. Man who never has been in harm's way had the opportunity to join the military, to serve his country in uniform, and I'm a rich boy. I'm a soft-skinned little pussy. I can't do that. His personal Vietnam was avoiding sexually transmitted diseases, he said to Howard Stern years ago. Although it will always be predominant, he says, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect the land from Russia or China. And why do they have a quote unquote right of ownership anyway? How do we have a right of ownership, Donald Trump? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago. The same justification you feel we have for this land, that a boat landed here hundreds of years ago. Therefore, it's white people land. Do you listen to yourself? MAGA, do you listen to the shit that your dipshit president says and thinks and foists upon the globe? I mean, I know a lot of you don't read, can't read, just like your dear leader. So maybe it's moments like this where you can hear me reading to you so you understand what's happening. Also, I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do something for the United States. The war is not secure unless we have, the world, is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President DJT. First of all, NATO has done much for the United States. They followed us into an illegal war in Iraq. They followed us into our war in Afghanistan. They answered the call and followed the NATO charter of protecting an ally when they are attacked. So Donald Trump, his idiot view of history, his lack of knowledge and understanding of all the things that have happened on the globe with our allies, is now coming back to harm the rest of us. I'm gonna play a clip from the BBC. They seem to be both nervous but also laughing at Donald Trump, as well they should be. And also The Guardian. I'm going to read you international news sources here to get you a flavor for how the world views this. Sometimes it's myopic to just look at the world. Not sometimes, it is always myopic to look at the world just through the lens of the United States and how we perceive things and how things will impact us. It is a classic way of an American to go through life in this weird, unearned arrogance about how we're great, we're the greatest, everybody else just, they bow down to the United States. And that's just not the case. Many countries view us as we should be viewed, especially in this moment, which is as a fucking joke. This is a BBC reporter reporting on this very thing in Davos right now.
In Davos this morning. Morning, Faisal. So the World Economic Forum gets underway a little later on. And of course, I imagine a lot of the chat will be about tariffs. What impact could they have on the UK and indeed the rest of Europe?
Now, Sally John, I hope you're sitting comfortably. I know that normally you talk to me about economics and numbers, but this is also the place where all these people will meet. Donald Trump is coming here on Wednesday. We think Keir Starmer might do. He might want to get his skates on because of something that's just happened. We have both the Norwegian Prime Minister and Finnish Prime Minister accounts of an exchange of letters, which is truly extraordinary. It is absurd and funny in a way, but it's also incredibly serious. Overnight, an email or exchange between those two and Donald Trump is reported to have replied, Considering your country, this is a message to Norway, decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped the wars, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. And then goes on to make an argument for why America should own Greenland. An astonishing note, really, to think that that would be sent by the President of the United States. And it just shows the sort of tone of the response of the conversation that will be had.
We are a laughingstock. We are an embarrassment. As well we should be. As well we should be. This is from The Guardian. Get a load of this headline. Donald Trump links threats to seize Greenland to Nobel Prize snub in letter. U.S. President says he no longer feels the need to think purely of peace in letter to Norwegian Prime Minister. Donald Trump has linked his repeated threats to seize control of Greenland to the fact that he has not been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in an extraordinary letter sent to the Norwegian Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre. The U.S. president said in the letter, the authenticity of which was confirmed by Støre to the Norwegian newspaper VG on Monday, that after failing to win the Peace Prize, he no longer felt the need to think purely of peace. Imagine that. This is something that a dipshit like Kim Jong-un or Vladimir Putin would have said. We could expect this kind of madman behavior from them. Because I didn't win the Peace Prize, I'm going to wage war. I'm so deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize that I'm willing to go to war to be awarded it. That's the sum and substance of it. And if you're wondering to yourself, if you're out there wondering, wow, how could this possibly be in the twisted mind of a moron? How could this be perceived as an America First agenda for the country? How could seizing, acquiring, invading, using violence and military force to make Greenland property of the United States, how is that America First? Well, don't worry, dipshit, Donald Trump asslick, Ted Cruz is here to explain it to you.
When it comes to Greenland, I want to commend President Trump for being single-mindedly focused on America first, on U.S. economic interest and U.S. national security interest. I believe it is overwhelmingly in America's national interest to acquire Greenland. A year ago, as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, I chaired a hearing on the benefits to the United States of America of acquiring Greenland. Now, some folks in the press, they clutch their pearls and they say, well, what do you mean acquiring Greenland? How could that happen? Look, the whole history of America has been a history of acquiring new lands and new territories. Whether you go back to Thomas Jefferson making the Louisiana Purchase, about half of the United States of America today, or you go back to America purchasing Alaska from Russia. You want to talk about, at the time they called it Seward's Folly, it turned out to be an extraordinarily consequential purchase. Greenland has massive rare earth minerals and critical minerals. There are enormous economic benefits to America. But it's also, like Alaska, it is located on the Arctic, which is a major theater for potential military conflict with either Russia or China. It's also critical for the Golden Dome and defending America from potential missile strikes. I commend the president for focusing on American national security.
Yeah, because where it is geographically can help stop any missile fire coming from adversaries like Russia and China.
When it comes to Greenland, you want to commend Donald Trump. Ted Cruz, come on, brother. We know you want to do far more to Donald Trump than just commend him. We're witnessing it metaphorically in your little news hit there with Fox News, with chief conspiracy theorist Maria Bartiromo. When it comes to Greenland, I want to commend President Trump for being single-mindedly focused on America first. How the fuck is another war America first? How is abandoning our allies, our peaceful allies, America first? How is it that we are transforming, we are morphing in real time into a country like Russia, where we're going to annex distant or neighboring nations? How is it America first? How is what will eventually be hundreds of billions of dollars expended in new military spending. How is that America first? We could use that money for child literacy, child hunger, child poverty. But instead, no. Donald Trump got snubbed because he didn't win the fucking peace prize because he did nothing to earn it. And we have to go to war for it. We have to threaten our peaceful allies. We should be being laughed at. We should be shunned on a global stage. I hope that Europe bands together to punish the United States economically. Start putting sanctions on shit. We deserve every bit of derision that is coming our way. And I hope that Democrats are waking the fuck up. I hope that going into the midterms, they realize what they must do. Pack the court. Impeach, convict, and remove anybody who steps out of the law. Kristi Noem already has impeach, convict, remove. Pam Bondi already has impeach, convict, remove. Anybody else? Kash Patel, Donald Trump, all of them. All of them. We need to earn back our place in polite society on a global stage. And it's going to be up to the adults in the room. And hopefully, elected Democrats are ready to be that. What do you think? I invite you to this conversation. We can have it in the comments below this video. You can also call the voicemail line. Looking at you, Norwegians. 714-576-4054. And of course, as always, you can email me daily at dollemore.com. Look, I'm not some wilting, shrinking violet about these matters. I don't think that there's never an excuse for the use of troops or the occupation. I don't believe that. I served in the United States Marine Corps, but let me tell you, unequivocally, with no doubt, with no shyness about it, this is bullshit. This is imperialist conquest, and I'm not here for it, and neither should you.
The Pentagon is preparing active duty soldiers for a possible deployment to Minnesota.
Coming off the coattails of the story about Norway and Donald Trump no longer thinking about peace. Why did you not give me the peace prize? I have to kill you now. I have to commit violence and threaten war over it. Europe should be afraid. Norway should be nervous. The countries that Donald Trump now has a vendetta against because he didn't get the peace prize. He got a soccer peace prize, but they should be afraid because, look, Donald Trump he's not even shy about sending in the troops to attack blue states within the borders of the United States. He's willing to use the military against the citizens of his own country if they didn't vote for him. He didn't get the ultimate prize from them of voting for him to be president, and he's willing to attack them. And his personal criminal defense attorney, because after all, Donald Trump is a convicted felon, is going on Fox News to explain that there will be no investigation. There will be no accountability for Donald Trump's masked secret police force that is murdering civilians in the streets. So this should also be a warning to international neighbors and friends and allies that Donald Trump, he's willing to kill his own people. He's certainly willing to kill yours. Watch this, and we'll talk about the troops on standby, the active duty United States military troops on standby to invade the city of Minneapolis.
Protesters for and against the Trump administration's ICE crackdown clashed in Minneapolis Saturday as Governor Tim Walz prepared to mobilize his state's National Guard troops to assist local law enforcement. As the Washington Post is reporting, the Pentagon is preparing active duty soldiers for a possible deployment to Minnesota. In a moment, we're going to bring in Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. But first, Fox News correspondent Matt Finn is in Minneapolis. Matt.
And Shannon, the Washington Post reports about 1,500 active duty soldiers are prepared to possibly head here to Minnesota if the violence escalates. And yesterday, it was another day of some pretty intense clashes.
First of all, when they talk about clashes with ICE agents, they're talking about people peacefully, aggressively, I've been there, screaming at ICE agents. It's not illegal. It's absolutely protected constitutional speech. That's what they're talking about. So Donald Trump is willing to send in military troops because people hurt the feelings of his Nazi mass secret police force, yelling at them, calling them names, calling them Nazis. That, in Donald Trump's minds, warrants military deployment to cities within the United States, blue cities in blue states. This is a MAGA war against those who disagreed with Donald Trump and didn't vote for him. That's what it is. Remember that op-ed? You may have seen this if you're online too much, like I am. But back in October of 2024, the year of the election, Derek Hunter wrote this piece for The Hill. Kamala's newest lie: Trump will send the army after you. You see, we knew it. Kamala knew it. We all talked about it, that this was the risk here, that Donald Trump was going to be unencumbered by decency, unencumbered by the law, unencumbered by anything that any other president has ever felt his job was about. He doesn't care. And if you didn't vote for him, he will punish you. He will strip away your child care funding. He will strip away your food assistance funding, and he will send in the military to harm you. And MAGA tried, that's just that bullshit. That's alarmist. Even some Democrats. You can't call everybody racist because they'll become racist. You can't call everybody Nazis or they'll secretly somehow become Nazis. Like that's how it works. And there is no accountability under Donald Trump. His mass secret police can go run roughshod through communities, murdering civilians, gassing peaceful protesters, cracking skulls. People who are exercising their First Amendments are being met with brutality. And they're not going to investigate. And that's where I'm going to leave you. I'm not going to leave you with this. We're going to talk about it on the other side. But Todd Blanche, on the very program that was just introed for you with Shannon Bream, he's saying that no. We're not going to investigate the shooting of Renee Good at the hands of Jonathan Ross, the masked Nazi ICE agent. No. We're not going to do that. You know why? Well, wait for it. If you haven't seen the clip, it is a doozy. His excuse for not investigating just to see what the facts on the ground are is that millions of people have already seen the clip, and that's why law enforcement doesn't need to do its job.
Well, the governor's response referenced a number of things, going after Mark Kelly, he says, Alyssa Slotkin, Jerome Powell. But he also mentioned what Matt Finn mentioned in his reporting there. He says the only person not being investigated for the shooting of Renee Good is the federal agent who shot her. So is the FBI conducting an investigation into that agent, into the shooting? What can you tell us about that? Will it be made public?
Look, what happened on that day has been reviewed by millions and millions of Americans because it was recorded on phones when it happened. Okay, the Department of Justice, our civil rights unit, we don't just go out and investigate every time an officer is forced to defend himself against somebody or putting his life in danger. We never do. That has nothing to do with what happened in Minneapolis. There are over 1,000 shootings every year where law enforcement are put in danger by individuals, and they have to protect themselves, and they have a lawful right to do so. The Department of Justice doesn't just stand up and investigate because some congressman thinks we should, because some governor thinks that we should. We investigate when it's appropriate to investigate. And that is not the case here. It wasn't the case when it happened, and it's not the case today. If circumstances change, and there's something that we do need to investigate around that shooting or any other shooting, we will. But we are not going to bow to pressure from the media, bow to pressure from politicians, and do something that we never do. Not under this administration, not under the last administration. And so, no, we are not investigating. And if there comes a time when we need to, we will, but it's not now.
What happened that day was reviewed by millions of Americans. Is that supplants the investigatory power and skill of the Federal Bureau of Investigation? Is that right? Well, millions of people also witnessed the insurrection that was incited by your boss, Donald Trump, but there was still convictions. There still needed to be an investigation. But you know that because you are a skilled talented lawyer. I mean, you lost the case that Donald Trump was involved in. But you're a deputy attorney general, Todd Blanche. A Nazi apologist. A fucking scumbag. A fascist enabler, or maybe just fascist in letter. This is where we are. This is why the world should be afraid. That's why the United States should be afraid. And being afraid doesn't mean we don't act. Remember, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in the face of fear. And I hope you'll be courageous with me. What do you think? I invite you to this conversation. Let's have it in the comments below the video. If you're on Facebook, make sure you're liking and following the Dollemore Daily Facebook page. On YouTube, subscribe. Those things are free. I appreciate it very much. It absolutely does help the channel.
ICE released a canister of tear gas, and the mother described giving her infant CPR. We're showing that video there.
Kristi Noem, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Kristi Noem wants to add 6-month-old babies to the list of living beings that she's murdered. I know it sounds aggressive, but hear me out. In Minneapolis last week, a 6-month-old baby was sent to the hospital because it stopped breathing after a flashbang device was tossed into the vehicle of parents who weren't there to protest. And it wouldn't matter if they were, but they were just transporting the family from a basketball game that one of the children was in. And they got caught up in an ICE raid, a targeted ICE raid. And they broke out the window. They threw pepper gas, pepper spray, a caustic chemical irritant into the car. And the family had to escape the car, rush in to be helped by bystanders in nearby homes. And ultimately, the baby had to be sent to the ER because it stopped breathing. The mom had to get on the phone with 911 to learn how to apply CPR to her baby. And Kristi Noem, the murderer of goats and dogs, is here for it. And the shifting narrative is really what gets to me here. Obviously, the near murder of babies is a problem, clearly. But we also need to pay attention to the lies. That's not the only targeted thing related to the Department of Homeland Security, because at the beginning of this, just like with Renee Good, oh, she's a domestic terrorist. When people asked about this family that was caught up in this raid, in this violence with ICE, they said, oh, well, they were there to protest. They were impeding law enforcement. Now that's not what they're saying. They're not apologizing for gassing a baby. But the narrative has shifted. Watch this. This is from Face the Nation yesterday with Margaret Brennan, where she's pressing Kristi Noem about the use of gas here. By the way, we're going to get to it, but Friday, a federal judge said, no more. You can't gas peaceful protesters. You can't brutalize people exercising their First Amendment rights. And by the way, they're still doing it. Then we're going to play a clip that in the same clip, within 5 or 6 seconds, Kristi Noem goes from we're not even using pepper spray against people to, oh, we're only doing it when blah, blah, blah. First, though, Kristi Noem delighting in the almost murder of a 6-month-old baby.
Acknowledge that. I want to talk to you about some of the incidents that the public has seen. There was a U.S. citizen, Aliyah Rahman, on her way to a medical appointment out in Minneapolis. She was dragged out of her car and detained. Video of her arrest was spreading on social media. There were allegations there of aggressive tactics. You've seen other incidents, for example, out in Minneapolis, this family with 6 children, with one as young as 6 months old, got kind of caught in the incident as they were driving to basketball practice. Mm-hmm. The mother, Destiny Jackson, told CBS ICE agents stopped the car, told them to leave, but the agents were in the way, and they feared that they would have happened to them what happened to Renee Good. They didn't drive off. ICE released a canister of tear gas, and the mother described giving her infant CPR. We're showing that video there. Do any of these tactics seem to you heavy-handed?
The family was caught up in that situation because of violent protesters that were impeding law enforcement operations. And that family would have never been in that situation if those protesters had been acting peacefully and law enforcement was able to do their job without being threatened. And so it's a terrible situation that family had to go through, and I hope it never happens again. But we need to remember that because the mayor and the governor have allowed this kind of violence to be perpetuated across Minneapolis is why there's other innocent people that are impacted throughout the city, but throughout their state as well. And it doesn't have to be this way. They could establish a peaceful protest zone. They could enforce their laws. And if Governor Walz didn't recognize that what he is doing there is poor leadership, he wouldn't have put his National Guard on standby in order to respond. And I'm hopeful that he does recognize that he needs to start working with us.
Are your agents going to comply?
I know the White House has asked him to.
So the family that they first claimed were radical Antifa domestic terrorists are now just, they just got caught up in this. You see, this is why you can't believe anything Kristi Noem says about anything. They lie. The same people who follow the man who said they're eating the cats and the dogs and the pets of the people who live there. The same guy who came out on stage after descending from his dipshit escalator and said, they're rapists, but I assume some are good people. That guy, the liar in chief, the whole narrative is lies. You can't believe anything they say. And a judge realizes it. A judge ruled on Friday, here's the headline, judge rules feds in Minneapolis immigration operation can't detain or tear gas peaceful protesters. Federal officers in the Minneapolis area participating in the largest recent U.S. immigration enforcement operation cannot detain or tear gas peaceful protesters who aren't obstructing authorities, including when these people are observing the agents, a judge in Minnesota ruled Friday. U.S. District Judge Kate Menendez's ruling addresses a case filed in December on behalf of 6 Minnesota activists. The 6 are among the thousands who have been observing the activities of Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol officers enforcing the Trump administration's immigration crackdown in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area since last month. Federal agents and demonstrators have repeatedly clashed since the crackdown began. The confrontations escalated after an immigration agent fatally shot Renee Good in the head on January 7th as she drove away from a scene in Minneapolis, an incident that was captured on video from several angles. Agents have arrested or briefly detained many people in the Twin Cities in violation of the law, in violation of the Constitution of the United States. You can't gas peaceful protesters. We know Donald Trump is fond of it. We witnessed it in 2020, just a block away from the White House when he was gassing, begging the defense secretary, Esper, to shoot them in the legs, to shoot peaceful protesters. Where are all the constitutional First Amendment absolutists when you need them? Where are all the conservatives who are like, my constitutional oath, I love the Constitution? They don't know anything about it. Their Constitution is whatever Donald Trump says, not the actual words of the Constitution, not the letter or the spirit of the Constitution. So, if you're wondering about Kristi Noem, and she gets pressed on this very matter about the federal judge's ruling, and in this clip, she says, well, it's a ridiculous ruling. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But also, we're not using pepper spray. But also, when we use the pepper spray that we're not using, we're using it this way. Make it make sense.
And I'm hopeful that he does recognize that he needs to start working with us.
Are your agents going to comply?
I know the White House has asked him to.
Sorry, with the federal order on Friday to not use chemical agents?
That federal order was a little ridiculous because that federal judge came down and told us we couldn't do what we already aren't doing. We just saw video of chemical agents being used. We only use those chemical agents when there's violence happening and perpetuating, and you need to be able to establish law and order to keep people safe. That's the only situation. So that judge's order didn't change anything for how we're operating on the ground because it's basically telling us to do what we've already been doing.
Madam Secretary, thank you for your time this morning.
The order was a little ridiculous, says Kristi Noem. I don't know how she gets the words out of her pillow lips. Maybe she's in some kind of a brand deal with Mike Lindell. She's got the My Pillow lips and the My Pillow cheeks and the fake horse hair. Maybe that's why she killed the goat, is it wasn't growing hair quickly enough for her to don that hair as her own. The order was a little ridiculous, she said, because the judge told us we couldn't do what we're already aren't doing. Already not doing it. But we just saw a video of chemical agents being used. We only use those things that I just said we aren't using when there's violence happening. That is a fucking lie. And you can... I have video of them firing pepper balls that create a plume of pepper gas while we were there. No violence happened. Peaceful protests. Loud, aggressive words? Yes, peaceful. Covered by the Constitution, within the bounds of our exercising our free speech. And they gassed us. They pepper sprayed us. She's a liar. I know she's a liar because I had to wash the pepper spray out of my clothes when I got back from Minneapolis. You can't trust anything, any narrative that they use, that they spew. They are disseminators of lies and propaganda, and nothing will stop them except for, hopefully, federal judges, hopefully elected Democrats. The midterms cannot come quick enough. We need to impeach, convict, and remove every one of these violators of their oath to the Constitution. What do you think? I invite you to this conversation. Let's have it in the comments below this video. You can also call the voicemail line, 714-576-4054. And of course, you can email me daily@dollemore.com. If you appreciate what I do, the work I do here, the tenor and the tone that I bring to the table, if I bring you value, more importantly, if I'm bringing you value on a video by video basis, please consider helping produce this work for $2 a month. You could do just that. Become a channel member right here on YouTube. Excuse me. Click the join button below. Or even better, you can go over to patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. I am all over the internet, not on the Nazi Twitter, but everywhere else at Dollemore. Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of them at Dollemore. I'd love to see you there.
Let me talk to you about the officer, Jonathan Ross. He was struck. He was hospitalized.
Oh, don't say his name. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we shouldn't have people continue to dox law enforcement when they have an 8,000% increase in death threats against them.
Let's stick with Kristi Noem. Let's stay on this interview from Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan yesterday. I want really just drill down on the fact that they are liars. If you use their statistics from their own organizations, they call you fake news. When you're using their stats to push back against the lies that she's telling, that 70% of all of the people we're arresting are criminals, the worst of the worst. All of this is lies. When they call an American citizen who was protesting ICE a domestic terrorist and that's why she deserved to be murdered, you can't believe them. You can't believe anything they say. When they say threats to ICE agents are up 1 billion%, assaults on ICE agents are up 80 quadrillion%. You can't believe them. They're liars. They follow a man who attempted to overthrow the United States government and is now trying to overthrow the narrative of the truth of that day. They're just liars. They are working in service to fascism, to try to create a white ethno-state here in the United States. It is something to behold. So, watch this clip of Kristi Noem just melting down in real time. It is just a full-fledged flip out when Margaret Brennan pushes back against the obviously fake statistics that Kristi Noem is trying to pass off, and instead to push back uses the actual Department of Homeland Security's website figures, and it sends her over the edge. Watch this.
Sure, but you just said millions. What's the breakdown of the percentage of those who you have in custody who have actually committed a criminal offense versus just the civil infraction?
Every single individual has committed a crime, but 70% of them have committed or have charges against them on violent crimes and crimes that they are charged with or have been convicted of that have come from other countries that are here illegally, first of all, and then they have committed a criminal act while they've been here or in their home countries as well.
It's not 70%.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is.
70% of everyone
you
you
guys
have
keep
detained
changing your percentage. You pick and choose what numbers you think work, but that is the facts, is that 70% of the people that we have detained have charges against them or have been convicted of charges, and they need to be brought to justice. And we're going to keep doing that no matter how much you guys keep lying and don't tell the public the truth. It absolutely is that these law enforcement officers are out there every day doing the work to protect the American people, and they will keep doing that because they believe in enforcing the law, which is exactly what President Trump has charged them with.
Okay. Well, our reporting is that 47%, based on your agency's own numbers, 47% have criminal convictions against them. But let's talk about the other numbers.
You're wrong again. Absolutely. We'll get you the correct numbers so you can use them in the future.
Well, that's from your agency.
Listen. One of the reasons we know that Kristi Noem is lying is because they act like we're trying to get the pedophiles off the street. We're trying to get the murderers off the street. We're trying to get the drug traffickers off the street. We're trying to get the human traffickers off the street. But then there's video after video after video after video after video after video after video of them chasing DoorDash drivers into houses, of them walking up to dudes getting gas and asking them, because they're black, where were you born? Asking women on the sidewalk, where were you born? They're not going after the worst of the worst. And the Department of Homeland Security's figures back that up. Your agency says 47% have criminal convictions. Wrong again. We'll get you the correct numbers. Yeah, we'll be waiting for those correct numbers, dipshit. We'll be waiting. And look, on the matter of them lying, you can't trust anything they say because the things that come out of their mouth strain rationality and reason. At one point in this interview, Margaret Brennan uses the name of the ICE agent, Jonathan Ross, who gunned down Renee Good. We watched it happen. Many angles. I've seen the video dozens of times. And even saying his name sends Kristi Noem into an apoplectic. Maybe she's having an allergic reaction from all of the fucking shit she's injected into her face. I don't know. But she freaks out at even the mention of his name that has been public for a long time. She calls it doxing to just say his name.
Well, you know that it is in dispute about weaponizing a car versus driving forward, but I'll put that aside.
No, it's really not. Everybody can watch the videos and see that.
Well, let me talk to you about the officer, Jonathan Ross. He was struck. He was hospitalized.
Well, don't say his name. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we shouldn't have people continue to dox law enforcement when they have an 8,000% increase in death threats against them. I know, but that doesn't mean it should continue to be said. His life, he got attacked with a car that was trying to take his life, and then the people have attacked him and his family, and they are in jeopardy. And we have law enforcement officers every day who are getting death threats and getting attacked at their hotels.
Well, can you tell me about his status right now?
Ice thrown at them and getting...
Well, of course, no one condones violence against anyone. But here, CBS reported that he did have internal bleeding in the torso, but he was released that same day. So is he back at work? Did you give him the required 3 days of suspension?
We followed the exact same protocols that we always have for years as to investigations into these situations. But
3 days of
I'm not going to talk
administrative
about
leave?
his medical records. I know that you know that in itself is his prerogative to discuss his health, but we're hopeful that all of our law enforcement officers know that they can go out and do their job, apply the law equally to everyone, and that they can do so safely, and that the media and people aren't going to attack them for standing up for what's right.
Look, Kristi Noem. Did I just dox Kristi Noem? Is that how it works? Let's do an experiment. Donald Trump. Oh my God. Is Secret Service going to show up because I just doxed the president of the United States simply by saying his name? Who else can I dox? Oh, let me think. Kash Patel, Pam Bondi. Oh my God, I am a criminal. I am a vile criminal who's doxing very important officials in the United States simply by saying their names. Are you fucking stupid, Christino? I mean, it's rhetorical. Of course you're stupid. You're not even the actual Department of Homeland Security Secretary. We know that to be Stephen Miller. You're taking orders from the shadow president, Stephen Miller. You're too busy cosplaying like you're some kind of an urban renegade, some tactical operator in an urban setting, wearing your 55-gallon dipshit hat in Texas and tactical urban assault gear for these slick little Instagram videos. But we know you're a liar, you're a fascist, and you will be held accountable. Shut it down. Impeach, convict, and remove. I invite you, as I always do, to this conversation. We can have it in the comments below this video. You can also call the voicemail line, 714-576-4054, and email me. You know, the old-fashioned way. daily@dollemore.com is the email address. I'd love to hear from you. Can immigrants feel safe in your establishment when there are Nazi Border Patrol and ICE agents in the establishment while they are welcome to their Heil Hitler happy hour? Can they? So back in March of last year, I did a video about a chef and restaurateur here in Washington, D.C. called Matt Baker. He owns or runs 3 restaurants. One or two of them are like failing right now because I believe of what he did. Gravitas, Baker's daughter, and Michelle's. And he tweeted to Donald Trump and Elon Musk, inviting them in anytime you want to come. While Doge was happening, while they're gutting the federal government, firing thousands of workers, you know, Matt Baker's prospective customer base. And now that they're raiding restaurants and doing their wild ethno-state creation, white ethno-state creation through their immigration raids. I'm sure it's even worse for Matt Baker now, but his MAGA sensibilities, it didn't stop him. Well, there's another bar in Washington, D.C. They have a location here in Washington, D.C. and in Arlington, and they own another bar in Arlington. What's the name of it? The 1969 bar. This is the Astro Beer Hall, where they allowed ICE and Border Patrol to have a little happy hour, where they printed CBPHH, which you would think would be Heil Hitler, but apparently it stood for happy hour in this case. So they are inviting Nazi fucks to come and take a load off and celebrate the day of kidnapping children, to celebrate the day of the murder of Renee Good here in Washington, D.C. And Code Pink showed up and protested it. They have video of it. I'm going to show you 2 segments of the video. One is what was taking place during the protest, and then the other that I'm going to show you is the owners of the business saying, hey, listen, this is our business. You're bothering our customers. You're disrupting our Nazis who are just here to take a load off after terrorizing the streets of the country. It is something to behold. First, let me get it out of the way. This is who they are. This is Astro Beer Hall. They have a location here in D.C. We'll throw up a map. We'll show up their website here and in Arlington. And then, of course, the 1969 bar. Here is the first video of Code Pink, these activists, the same activists who show up at restaurants in Washington, D.C. when Scott Bessent shows up. They did the same thing when Donald Trump showed up with Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance in a restaurant. They're doing good work in this particular case, absolutely. So here it is, and I want you to notice the people in the background. There's a short, squat lady with a pink shirt, I believe. She's got like a web tactical belt. It's just dipshits all the way around, but they don't even want to show their faces. They're turning their back to the camera because they're so ashamed of what they do. They can't even be proud of the Nazi work that they do. Here's Code Pink, and then we'll get to the owner's reaction in real time.
You are murderers! You have killed people! Terrorizing our fucking communities!
We are here in Washington, D.C., where CBP is having a happy hour. CBP is responsible for the terrorizing of our communities. Establishments should not be welcoming them here. They should not be able to have a happy hour in peace while our communities have been terrorized, abducted, and kidnapped, and killing people for standing up to them.
CBP, are you toasting for the murder of Keith Porter? CBP, are you toasting for the murder of Renee Good? CBP, are you toasting for the shooting of Joe Brown? CBP, are you toasting for the people that you killed today? CBP, are you toasting for the children that you kidnapped today? CBP, are you toasting for the children that you beat today? No ICE, no CBP, you're the public enemy. No ICE, no CBP, you're the public enemy.
What the fuck are you guys celebrating? You can't even show your face. You can't show your face to us. You are drinking your beer and putting your back to us. Shame on you. Y'all are fucking Nazis. You're the out now.
Good for them. No rest for Nazis. No rest for fascists. You should not be able to hang around in good company, in decent company, in a public establishment while you're terrorizing the citizens and community members all across the country. Fuck Nazis. Fuck ICE. Fuck Border Patrol. Every single one of them. So, what did the owners do to rush to the aid of these Nazis? Watch this.
They do not get to frequent businesses who are run by immigrants.
Ma'am,
They are
you
not.
are bothering our guests. Like, we're trying to run a business here.
I understand that. They are doing more than bothering our community. They are killing them.
No ICE, no CBP. You're the public enemy. No ICE, no CBP. You're the public enemy.
Please,
no
please,
CBP.
please,
You're the public
gotta go.
enemy. ICE out now. ICE out now. ICE out now. ICE out now. Shame on you. Shame on you. You're a fucking murderer. Fuck you.
See you later. Good night. Go to some business. Good night.
Now look, obviously I wouldn't be doing this video if the business had made a statement that said, look, we didn't know, we're sorry, we absolutely support the immigrant community, many of which probably work for them. But that's not what they did. They doubled down in this half-hearted bullshit statement that they posted to Instagram, which, by the way, don't bother going to Instagram. All of their comments are turned off on all of their posts. I guess there's Yelp, but those will eventually end up being deleted too. This is the statement from Astro Beer Hall about them welcoming Nazis to their Heil Hitler happy hour. Astro Beer Hall exists to bring people together, even Nazis, I guess. For almost 7 years, we have served neighbors, visitors, and longtime regulars from across the community, and also Nazis, I guess, without regard to the politics, profession, or background, even if you're a Nazi. Our doors are open to all, including Nazis, who treat our staff and fellow guests with respect. Recently, a small group of longtime customers / Nazis visited Astro for a private gathering that you reserve space for. A private gathering of approximately 6 to 12 people. These guests have been patrons of Astro for almost 7 years and work as engineers for U.S. Border Patrol. They are not ICE agents, and the gathering was not an ICE-related event. The fuck it wasn't. These are the same people who give comfort, aid, technical support for the operations of ICE. Fuck you, Astro Beer Hall in Washington, D.C. At Astro, our priority is and will always be the safety and well-being of our staff and our guests, even the Nazi ones. We remain committed to providing a welcoming, inclusive environment where everyone can feel safe. Can immigrants feel safe in your establishment when there are Nazi Border Patrol and ICE agents in the establishment while they are welcomed to their Heil Hitler happy hour? Can they? Can they feel welcomed and secure and safe? We also want to be clear about our values. Oh, here we go. Here's their values. Astro supports immigrants, supports our diverse community, and supports the people who choose to gather with us in good faith. Blech. We believe it is possible and necessary to hold space for many perspectives, including Nazi ones, including the systematic creation of a white ethno-state. All viewpoints are valid. Both sides. There were very fine people in this establishment, even the Nazis. Very fine people. Am I right? Am I right, Astro Beer Hall? We believe it is possible and necessary to hold space for many perspectives while treating one another with dignity. You mean like Renee Good was treated? Was she treated with dignity? Was the 6-month-old baby that was met with a flashbang and pepper spray, was it treated with dignity, Astro Beer Hall? Fucking cowards. We appreciate the many voices who care deeply about our city and our shared humanity. We ask that conversations remain respectful. Fuck off. And that our staff not be put in a position of managing conflict that belongs outside our walls. Then don't invite the conflict in to the walls of your business. You set aside a space for them. CBP Heil Hitler happy hour. You did it. They shouldn't be in the four walls of our business. Thank you to our community for your continued support of Astro Beer Hall and of small businesses across the DMV. And here's their contact information. This is a business that deserves to fail. This is a Nazi collaborator in our midst, in D.C. Look, do what you're going to do in Virginia and Northern Virginia, but in Washington, D.C., the city in which I live, look, I don't live in the Northern Virginia area. I don't live in Maryland. I live in the city of Washington, D.C. I can tell you where I'm not going to spend my money. I won't tell you what to do with your money. I won't tell you who to call and who not to call, who to contact and who not to contact. That's not my job. I'm just here to give you my particular take on this matter. Get at me, Astro Beer Hall. Change my mind. Let's have a peaceful, respectful dialogue about it. You can call my voicemail line or email me, Astro Beer Hall. Those numbers are 714-576-4054. And of course, you can email me. It's not a number, but it's an email address, daily@dollemore.com. Do not collaborate with Nazis. Seems like a pretty easy bar to navigate, right? That's all we ask. Don't collaborate with Nazis. Anyway, I love and appreciate you very much. I'd love to hear from you. I'll see you next time. Be genuine. And this is very easy, Astro Beer Hall. Take care of one another.